Ladies and gentlemen, for our last session of this evening or this day is a discussion that dwells on the poster child of startup success, a company which has seen the high of highs in the last few months, from an idea to the biggest IPO story, the Zomato story. And breaking down this story for us is Shweta Rajpal Kohli, who's the head of public policy, India and Southeast Asia for Sequoia Capital. As the head of public policy, she is passionate about educating policymakers on the transformational impact of technology and sharing stories of how startups are changing the world around us. And today, to help us unravel the story, she will be talking to Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Deepinder Goyal, and Mohit Patnagar. Over to you, Shweta.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. And it's a real honor and privilege for me to be hosting this session from idea to IPO, the Zomato story with three legends, or shall we say stalwarts of the startup ecosystem. Zomato founder Deepinder Goyal and two people who believed in him and his story, his idea, and his journey. Sanjeev Bikhchandani of InfoEdge and Mohit Bhatnagar of Sequoia India. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being part of this amazing panel today. It is clear that Zomato's remarkable 13-year journey of grit, determination, hard work, and a laser sharp focus has turned it into a poster child of sorts for tech entrepreneurship, one that has inspired founders not just in India but around the globe. And of course, the recent blockbuster stellar IPO is being seen as a victory not for Deepinder, not for Zomato, not for the team, and not for investors, but for the entire startup ecosystem of India. So let's set the stage and go back in time because this is all about the idea to IPO story and go back in time to 2008. Deepinder, tell us all about how it started. Why is it that the idea of creating probably just soft copies of restaurant menus seemed so compelling at that time?
So thanks for having me here. The story actually starts back in 2005 when I just got out of IIT Delhi, and I had a food ordering startup back then, 2005. Windows laptops, small Microsoft Clipart kind of widgets for restaurants to receive orders. It was way too early and didn't work. Of course, it actually couldn't work. 2005, and then we shut that down. I joined Bain for 4 years, and in the middle of Bain, I actually recognized that people still need to order food. So this whole online ordering process will not work. I just need to put up scanned menu cards and put phone numbers of restaurants online, and we started getting a lot of traffic. And initially, we only did that for Bain, like just for the office. And everybody at Bain was a bachelor, didn't used to bring food from home, and we used to get. I mean, everybody used to visit the site twice a day. I thought that's a lot of DAUs. So let's take it to more customers, and we expanded to Delhi, and then we expanded over India, and then to more countries. And the whole concept was very simple: curate a lot of content, put it online. People use that content, which was not available anywhere else, and sort of transact with restaurants over the phone. And later on in 2015, we actually started the food delivery service one more time. This was exactly 10 years after the 2005 launch. And we are
Right,
here
clearly.
now.
What a story, Deepinder. What a story indeed. And clearly, the vision of Zomato as it exists today is not something that you had back then, 13 years ago. It is something that evolved over a period of time. Is that correct?
Yes, I think, I mean, we always knew that we would be powering a food ordering, we would be a food ordering platform. What we actually didn't know back then, that we would be managing a lot of riders as well, that we will be doing the last mile ourselves. We thought that we'd be a marketplace. Like back then, everybody else was a marketplace. And we started off as a Yelp-like company, right? Only classifieds, advertising driven. And then we moved to a marketplace business. And then we figured out that this is not going to work. And we are going to get our handed over to us if we don't get into the last mile. So we started doing that as well, and that was a hard leap, right? Because we're a content company, and then we had to become a full out, like all out ops company. So the DNA had to change. So we did that, and luckily we made it until now. Not saying that the job is done. I think there's a lot of work to do. Uh, so continuing to do it.
Right, and that's something you always talk about, that you're just 1% done. We'll talk more about that in just a bit, but we want to continue talking about how it all started and all the excitement on behalf of the investors. Sanjeev, let me bring you in here to talk about that famous story of that cold email that you sent to Dipinder. Tell us all about it.
Well, the site was called Foodie Bay, and my son's a foodie, I'm a foodie, and we used to use it regularly every week, to figure out where to go for lunch or dinner on Saturday or Sunday, right? And I used the site, and my son used the site largely because it was the only site with all the menu cards. So you could see what's available where, what price, what dish, and then figure out where to go. Because it gives you much more information. And unknown to me, Hitesh Oberoi, who's my business partner and is the CEO of Info right now, and has been so since 2010. He was also using it, and we'd done a couple of investments, and it was a small team of 1.5 people doing investments, and we had done Policy Bazaar, we'd done a couple of others, and Hitesh said, have you used this site Foodie Bay? I said, yes, I use it every day, all the time, well, every week, okay, and he says, so do I. Isn't it great? I said, yeah, super. He says, how come we're not looking for investing? We are investing in 5 or 6 companies already. Look at this one. And the penny dropped. And I said, yeah, how stupid of me. Why have I not thought about it? So I went to Network Solutions. I did a Whois search, and I found admin contact Dipinder Goyal. Then I did a Google search, Dipinder Goyal. I found an email ID somewhere. So I sent an email which said, Dipinder, are you the guy behind Foodie Bay? If so, well done. Super work. We love the site. Could we meet? I want to talk. Now, that was poor communication on my part. I didn't say what I want to talk about. Now, Deepak didn't get back to me for 2 days. And then afterwards, he told me, listen, I thought you were a Naukri sales guy trying to sell me a subscription, so I didn't get back to you. But anyway, then he sort of did a Google search and found my name, and he figured who I was, so he got back to me. And we met up, and I think so one key question we ask is, where did you get the idea from? Now, the answer can be, it's done well in the US, this idea, so I thought it'd do well in India. But for us, that's the wrong answer. The right answer is, if the idea came from a customer insight. And the truth is, this idea came from a customer insight. So Deepinder told me the whole Bain story. And that one weekend, he came and scanned all the menu cards and put it on his personal page in the office intranet. And within 2 days, the IT infra guy came to him and said, hey, how come all the internal traffic is going to your homepage? What have you done? And that's when the penny dropped in Dipinder's head that, look, aggregation of menu cards has got value. And he went out on weekends and did it. And, so we look for natural traction. That is the site getting traffic? Is the app getting downloaded without spending on marketing? And is this traffic increasing? If it is, you hit a hot button, they're onto something. Now, how you'll monetize, we can think how you'll monetize, but it wasn't really being monetized. It was 1 lakh rupees a month, 100,000 rupees a month of revenue at that stage. But we love this. We like Dipinder. We met Pankaj. We like Pankaj. They met, Dipinder met Hitesh and Amrish. Amrish was then our CFO. And it was a rare occasion when all 3 of us agreed that, this is a great company to back. Good idea. And so I asked Dipinder, are you talking to anybody? He says, yes, I have a conversation going on. And he named a top tier, American VC. And he said, I said, what's the conversation? He said, $500,000 for 25% of the company. And I straight away said, listen, $500,000 you'll consume in 6 to 9 months. It takes 6 months to raise money. So you'll have to start raising money in about 2 months' time with nothing to show for it. That no change. Why didn't you raise $1 million? We'll up the valuation. And that's what we did. And we shook hands in about 72 hours. And I think I signed the term sheet in about 10 days' time, and I think maybe within 3 weeks after that, we had done the SHA. Deals like this, in hindsight, are once in a lifetime.
Right.
Okay, and so beginner's luck. I was totally inexperienced in investing. I mean, I'd been investing for 3 years, but so nobody in our team ever had investing experience, right? We were just learning on the job. And I think Policy Bazaar and Zomato were two of our early ones. We did Policy Bazaar in 2008 and Zomato in 2010. So it worked out. Yeah, but it was a cold call. Network Solutions Zindabad, Google Zindabad, that I could trace the business.
Would you do that today, Sanjeev?
So here's the thing, right? Early on, we had the confidence of ignorance. So, for example, we went into Policy Bazaar uh, with a 20 crore investment. 20 crores was what, $4 million then, $4.5 million then. It was huge for us on a PowerPoint presentation, right?
Right.
And we took 49% of the company, right? It was foolish of them to give 49% away. It was foolish of us to bet so much money for a company our size with a small balance sheet relative to a
These are
fund.
all conversations in hindsight, right?
Right? So we were both foolish, and we had the confidence ignorance. I mean, to shake hands in 72 hours and do a term sheet in 5-6 days is uncharacteristic of us. Now we have a process, we have people, we have an
Right.
IC, we have IC note, and do all that.
Right.
That time it was 1.5 people.
But what a story! What a story, Sanjeev! And it is really a story that we're telling today after so many years, and that's what makes it even more special. That anecdote, that those
And
72 hours.
it was a fairly relaxed time. I remember a year or year and a half after
I
the
can see
first money
Deepinder
went in.
laughing on that, on how it was.
Deepinder was probably talking to his classmates who were in the investing or banking business, and he came and said, "Hey, your lick pref is 2x or something." Okay, and I didn't even know lick pref what it meant, and I mean,
This was in Series C. This was in Series BC. Like so, and
yeah,
we
that's the
had the
third or
list
fourth
prep
round.
all
I
along.
said, hey,
Yeah.
wait a minute,
Yeah.
I just like your lick pref of 2x. I said, really? And the lawyer had put it in, and it just nobody looked at it closely. I mean, not us, not Dipinder. And he said, "What's your intention?" I said, "No, not really. I mean, I don't think it, And I called in Amrish, and I said, "Yeah, Amrish, this is 2x. Just can you change
Right,
it?"
right,
So I looked at the Amrish. Also, I think on the spot we decided, what, 5 minutes? Yeah, we can change it, and we changed from 2x to 1x.
right.
That was again an oversight, and which now would be impossible to do because now we have audit system processes, all of that. Uh,
Right.
Also, we had pref stock, and we were going from 49 to 57 in the fourth round, which we had done. And Deepinder said, "I'll let you go to majority only if you convert to ordinary stock." Right? And now, again, spur of the moment, I said, "Okay, we'll convert to ordinary stock." Now, we never do it, because right now we have legal advice and we have lawyers, and how can you go to from pref to regular stock? What's wrong with you? You have get a rights that way. So we did many things on the fly, in conversations, which today we probably would not do.
Right.
But we are a larger investor, larger company now with more systems and processes. So
Right. So let's
some
talk
extra.
about one more of these spur of the moment, kind of meetings and decisions, Sajeev. You, of course, introduced Mohit to Deepinder, and Mohit, would love to hear from you about yet another interesting story about how an investor came on board. And that fascinating 7 a.m. meeting. And of course, we'll have Deepinder talk about his version of both of these meetings too. Deepinder, we'll come to you. But Mohit, to you first.
No, it dovetails well. I was meeting with Sanjeev like I used to normally do at some every alternate month or so, and he was talking about Zomato, and he couldn't. He was jumping off his seat and how excited he was about the company. And I asked for an introduction, and right as I left his office and as I was driving back, I wrote to DP and I suggested that I'd love to catch up and meet. And since I was actually leaving in 48 hours to the US, we were raising our next big Sequoia fund, and I was headed out to go meet LPs for an LP roadshow. I suggested that we try and do it, right away in the next day or two before I left. And DP was like, "Hey, that may be hard, and it's all backed up the calendar. But if you can, let's try and meet really early." And really early was exactly something as crazy as that early. By the way, you should know the farmhouse, which is where we first met, and is a cradle for many stories that this thing is impossible to find because DB tell me I don't know if it's still possible to find it on Google, but it needs a lot of directions, and so it's a maze. So we managed to
Did you
somehow
get
get
there
there.
on time, Mohit?
I doubt it, but he was there, and despite him being hard to reach initially, he was there with a nice warm cup of coffee, and we had a great breakfast, a great meeting. Uh, I realized right then that this was a super special thing. I called my partners I think it was a Saturday, and I said, "Hey, we got to do this IC meeting. Can't wait." So we called for a special IC meeting. I think we had DP come in and speak to the team on a Saturday morning. I canceled my trip to the US. I think this was one of the few companies, as an example, that Sanjeev was talking about. We never even did a term sheet, I don't think, DP. I think we went to docs pretty much. So the idea here was to sort of just quickly get this wrapped up so you can get on with this company building. And so I remember this to be one of, similar to Sanjeev, a transaction where we broke all the rules and sort of got this done fairly rapidly.
Right, breaking the rules, getting it done rapidly. I think that those are things that we can now look back on and reminisce and say, wow, thank God we made those decisions. But Dipinder, let's hear your version of both of these stories. What was going through your mind when you were contacted both by Sanjeev as well as Mohit? And yes, of course, how that relationship has grown over the years. Of course, they've been investors, but more than that, friends, mentors, and believers in the Zomato story.
So, Sanjeev's story is that we were actually launching our Bombay section back then. So there was 2 night outs back to back, and I was working, and I got this email, and I dismissed this as salesperson Naukri because, by the way, Naukri salespeople do send a lot of emails. Okay, so 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 there was one
That
of
is
them, and I said, "Cool, this is okay." Archive, and 48 hours we're working, and then maybe like 2 days later, 3 a.m. Okay, like late night when I'm just going to sleep, about to sleep, that email sort of like surfaces back on top of my mind. I'm thinking it was definitely not a salesperson. Like there was something else. There was a tone of authority in that email. I should look that person up, and I Googled, and then it's like, oh shit, like this is Sanjeev. And then I write
wow.
back a cheesy kind of an email to him saying that I would love to meet. And now I sleep at 4 a.m. He wakes up at 5 a.m. Like that's how life works, right? So and he wakes up at I like email him at 4. I would love to meet. He wakes up at 5 and says, "Come meet me at 8 a.m." Okay, no, but I wake up at 12 noon. Okay, and I miss this email twice now. Okay, so and then I email him, sorry Sanjeev, late night. Can I like come meet you right now? And he doesn't know where I live, right? Noida, Gurgaon, nothing. I emailed him at about noon, and he said, okay, come meet me at 1. I said, cool. Like now, I'll have to make it at 1. Okay, so I drive super duper fast. That's probably the only time I bang my car on the road. I make it somehow at 1 at 1,
Yeah, he drives very slow,
and
right, Sanjeev?
Yes.
that
Yeah, we
was
believe that.
also the only time I ever banged my car. So, but yeah, the deal was done in like 2 hours. Like I think we had a handshake in that meeting itself, and then there was some ifs and buts of meeting the rest of the team, but that happened over the next 72 hours. And yeah, 3 weeks the money was in. It was pleasant, and we're actually grateful in hindsight to have had Info Edge along with us all the while. So it was good to not have a American VC step in as the first person to actually invest in Zomato.
Right, and then the
Operating
story about
expertise.
right. No, Dipinder, I think it's really really interesting. Especially, I think the 4 a.m. 5 a.m. story is absolutely interesting. But the action, the bias for action, the fact that there was interest on both ends, and yet you didn't know what you were getting into, and those are life changing moments, really. And Sanjeev, I'm sure you thought hard about that email, but I think what's even more fascinating is that light bulb moment for Dipinder to say, you know what, I need to look at that email once again. What if that didn't happen? Would life
I would
have
have sent
been
him. I would have sent him a reminder. I was not going to let go. I was not going to let go so easily.
all right? So we're confident Sanjeev wouldn't have let him go,
So
but
there's another interesting story about how the Foodie Bay name changed to Zomato.
please go ahead, tell us
Deepinder.
before we
Do you
go
remember
to
that one? Deepinder?
Please
No.
go ahead.
So, we invested in Zomato and we issued a press release in Foodie Bay, and we issued a press release. Now, my brother's a prof at UCLA, and he saw the coverage online. He said, "You invest in a company called Foodie Bay?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I assure you, you're going to get a legal notice from eBay." And I said, "Don't be silly. It's not food eBay. It is foodie, which is the word, and bay."
Yeah.
Says, no, I told Deepinder, my brother's saying this. He said, nah, it's not going to happen. And within 2, 3 weeks, there was a legal notice from eBay.
No, no, slightly different version in reality,
Okay,
right?
tell
So
me, tell
we
me.
Okay, so
Remind me.
Dipinder, your version now.
decided that we're going to change it anyway. It's not worth the risk. It's early on.
Yeah,
We're actually
yeah.
going to
So
change the name.
legal notice came, we said change
We
it.
decided to change the name, and after we changed the name, the legal notice landed at about those 2 days after we changed the name. And then we just didn't bother to respond to the notice.
Okay.
And a little more around why Zomato, why and how that name came about.
So Foodie Bay's logos had the tomatoes in them, like double O, tomato. And so we're just looking for a play on tomato. So we got Zomato, and it was $10,000. I didn't want to pay $10,000 for a domain name. Sanjeev, that's actually probably the only time he lost his shit on me, saying that I will pay $10,000 from my own personal pocket. Get this name. So I said, cool.
I put up
If
a
you're
checkbook, I
feeling
remember that. So he's okay, okay, I'll
if
do
you're
it.
feeling
So
so
his thing was,
emotional about it,
they said $10,000 is 1% of the first round. A valid point, you know. So I said, just change it, yeah.
Right. Interesting, fascinating. Dipinder, coming back to now your version of Mohit's first meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you gave the 7 a.m. time, almost hoping he wouldn't land up.
yes. So Sequoia back then didn't have a good name with founders, right? There were only a handful of them, 5 or 6, and there were a lot of storytelling, and you didn't know who to actually believe. And I already had term sheets, so didn't need to go there. So I actually gave Mohit a 7 a.m. meeting time, thinking he wouldn't land up, and that's not my usual waking up time. I don't do 7 a.m.
You should
meetings
have
at
told
all,
him
right? So
to make it even harder. 7 a.m. on the 8th floor, the lift's not working.
and Mohit said, okay, cool. Then I wake up early, I get coffee for everyone, I get breakfast for everyone. We did the meeting. And I think in hindsight, what has worked for me in general in life, that my judgment of people is 99% okay. Like, so I've never been let down by my judgment of someone. So we've always gone after the right people, whether or not we have the right valuation or whether or not the terms are correct. We've never really bothered about what's written on the SHA, as long as we can trust the people or the opposite end of the table. And that has worked out well for us, because if you place trust in people, people also place trust back in you. And that has happened with everybody who has worked with us over time.
Right. Amazing. And I think let's move on now, because I think that this journey is fascinating right from day one till today, and you keep saying you're just 1% done. But why don't you shine the torch on some crucible moments in your company building journey, Dipinder? And I would love to hear the same from both Mohit and Sanjeev as well, because they've been part of that journey throughout. But DP, from you first, what according to you have been the most crucible moments, whether it's been highs or lows, but real milestones according to you in that journey?
I don't know, actually. Like, we go through like crucible moments every week, every day. So it's all the same journey, right? So everything is as hard as it is. So I don't know the answer to that
Okay,
question.
okay. I'll let
I
Mohit.
don't think too much about the past or the present. It's okay. Like, we do what we do.
Sure. So
Sorry.
let me have Sanjeev and Mohit answer that question. What according to you were those milestone moments in that journey?
I'll point to two. First is, it's probably not a moment, but it's probably a journey, which is Zomato, and one of the really cool parts about the culture at Zomato, and you need to visit the Zomato office to see this. There used to be this big wall, almost like a wall of fame, and it had pictures of all the people that had sort of been very instrumental in the journey thus far. Now that wall has got changed to actually having some blank spots that show how there will be still people to join the company that will be instrumental, and this is a journey over many decades, not a small period of time. But this thing around the team evolution, to me, was really a constant evolution of how Zomato has morphed and changed. Initial set of guys and gals who just lived it, breathed it, dreamt it. Then the ambition increased to become something else. Some of them moved on to other roles and other things. Others joined the party. More recently we've got GG and MG. We've had folks in the past like MK and others, clearly Pankaj in the early years. There's so many people along the last 10 years who've had fingerprints on the success at Zomato. And Dipinder himself, and like he said, he's in the weeds, he's fighting the war every day. I mean, he's changed so much as a person. Dipinder, as we all know him, is still probably one of the best product guys who's got a nose for what the customer pulse is. But he's had to learn that he can't sort of do everything himself. It's just too big and too large and too complex an operation. How do you make other people successful over the last 5 to 10 years? It's been a massive journey, at least as I've observed him. I remember once I was sitting, and by the way, I've learned and I've grown thanks to Dipinder and Zomato myself. This was one of my first early investments, and I've Dipinder is one of those guys who says it to you like it is, and you learn about yourself as you go through a journey with him. But I remember this one chat, DP. I don't know if you remember it. We were sitting in your office, and I was all bubbly about this new idea and this new person and this new geography. And Dipinder made this very nice analogy where he should just nod, absorb, not say, not do anything about it. And I was asking him, like, why the hell aren't you reacting? Like, do you agree, disagree with this? He said, look, every time you come and talking, I'm seeing a whole picture today of how Zomato operates. And what you're telling me is about this one pixel that you're asking me to change. And it's probably a good idea to change it, but I won't change it till I actually see the whole new picture, if you will. And so I think DP himself has sort of just got so many people from the early days like Sanjeev and to now a public market sort of CEO. He's got so many people who've sort of been with him, trained him, talked to him, mentored him over the years. But I love the way he sort of takes everybody's inputs, sits down, and then sort of does a first principles thinking and does what he does. And if there was one area to pick as crucible, it would be how DP has changed in hiring talent and capabilities in his company over the last 10 years.
Sanjeev, your thoughts there?
I think the big moment, the big decision, if I were to pick one decision, it was the decision to go into delivery.
Yeah.
So here's this. There must be a dozen times where I've told Dipinder, I don't think it's a good idea, don't do it. And 11 out of those 12 times he did not listen, and I was probably right. And all of this pertain to expanding internationally, this geography, that geography. The 12th time, I said, don't do it. I said, don't do delivery. He didn't listen, and he was right big time. And that, I think, completely transformed and changed, and in COVID time, saved the company. So I think the big ones, he gets right. So look, Dipinder, Zomato, I think, experiment a lot. They try new ideas. Very often those ideas don't work. But the ones that do, they stay with and they work big time. I think that's a pattern.
Right. And I'd love to get...
I don't know, Dipinder, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and also your thoughts around the pivot to delivery and why you were so confident on that working.
That's Dipinder, right?
Me?
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So I didn't know whether it would work or not. I just knew that if we didn't do it, we'd be done forever. Like we had literally no choice but to figure it out. It was just that, nothing else. We had no idea whether it will work, whether we'll ever make money, whether we'll win, whether we'll be able to build the team. But we knew that if we didn't do all of those things, this company was done. So it was a make or break kind of a situation for us.
And just to put it in context, just to remind you guys, the company was doing very well, was almost getting ready to go public many years ago. It had a high gross margin business model. And so that's why some of the debate in that room, I remember that board meeting that we did, there was contention.
We used to make about $2 million of profit per month, $10 million of revenue per month, growing at about 60-70% year on year. That was Zomato.
So the decision was less about food delivery. It was about to basically take a new guard in the company and basically go invest in a whole line of business, let going your profitability and your sort of journey to a faster IPO. So it was a fairly strategic decision. And it was very contentious at a board level, I remember.
Right. No,
I think the point of view back then was like, will this company actually survive 10 years? Like the shape and form at that time, we didn't see it surviving 10 years. We had to change. So, and in my head, I'm usually always thinking 10 years from now, is this company going to survive 10 years from now? What do we need to do right now in order to still be relevant 10 years from now?
Yeah, and I am going to ask you that 10 years from now question, but a little later as we go into the session. And it's absolutely exciting to keep hearing some of these anecdotes from the three of you. But one question I want to definitely ask both Sanjeev and Mohit is around, and I know both of you have touched upon it a bit already, but if you could elaborate a little more around the personality of the founder, and Dipinder here, representing Zomato here. Mohit and Sanjeev, you both meet with hundreds of founders. You've engaged with them, you've partnered them, you've mentored them, but tell us a little more about what sets Zomato apart as a company, what sets the founders apart in this case.
Mohit, you want to go first?
Sure, I can take a crack. When founders ask me the same question, and what's DP like and what's there to learn from him, I use this very ambiguous term of X factor, and some founders have it, and there are different spikes for different people. For DP, for me, it's always been this audacity of ambition. Um, when we invested, we took most of the Sequoia investment literally within a quarter, and we made this massive 50 million, I think, DP, acquisition of Urban Spoon in that neighborhood, right? There was a young Indian company that was, doing well in India, but had got some early success in Middle East. But TP was just dreaming about the biggest market, and which was the US. And I remember walking into this beautiful farmhouse with this black poster which says something to the effect that we'll eat Yelp for lunch, or something like Yelp's lunch or something like that. And so just the audacity of the dream, even then when you were small, probably people didn't even see you on the world map, to put yourself on the world map by making an inorganic. Long story short, it didn't work out. But I learned through that he wasn't going to, if he was going to play, he was going to play big. And so over and over again, I've seen that trait with DP. Even now today, when, once he and I were recently on a drive, and he shared with me a very interesting thing where he went around the table to his leadership team and talked about what their vision for Zomato might be going forward. And in his own words, there are people who know marketing better than DP. There are people who perhaps are as good on product as them. There are people who certainly know finance, and people in all these functional areas. And there are smart people at what they do in the company. But I think what separates a founder, and DP in particular, is the sheer ambition to say you're dreaming too small. You should actually have a much higher mountain that you want to climb, and you can sort of go do it in 5 to 10 years. That's hard. That's the soft X factor that I refer to.
Amazing, amazing. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Sanjeev, your thoughts there?
No, when look, Dipinder, right from the beginning. I mean, I think extreme clarity of thought. Very, very good at product. I mean, probably the best I met in India. And I don't like to say it to his face, but I've said it often enough inside our boardroom at InfoEdge that I have not met a better product person. Right? And I don't say that lightly. Okay, I think crazy ambition, in a sense, not afraid, not intimidated. The people of my generation would be very happy to be market leaders in India. And Deepinder said, look, India is just a launch pad. Why not global? I think single-minded focus on achieving goals. Unafraid of calling a spade, and unafraid of punching above his weight. And if you offend somebody, too bad. I've seen him negotiate with very big companies on potential, where there was a Zomato acquisition offer, and I've not seen anybody negotiate like that.
All right, it's clearly a very, very interesting mix out there that spells success, and it's a fantastic cocktail, I would say, that has led to Zomato's stellar success. But Dipinder, let's cut to today now, and that blockbuster IPO, what that meant to you and to the company. And I would like to actually here highlight your back to work tweet post the IPO, which probably was sending a very strong message. And for the benefit of everyone watching who probably doesn't remember that tweet, I'll read it out. I have it here with me. A lot of people are calling this a historical moment. It is not. History is always made in hindsight, never in the present. Back to work. Share with us what was going through your mind when you tweeted that, and what the IPO meant to you.
So I think one of the most important things for the team, for me, for everybody, is to control our egos, right? So, and with all the love we were getting during the IPO, we could easily bloat our egos and say we have arrived and we're done. Whereas we're clearly not done. Right? There's so much work to do. We're just getting started. Blah blah blah. And yeah, it was the tweet was more like more about internal messaging than about external messaging. Didn't care about external messaging at all. But I think if I had only sent this message internally, it wouldn't have created the kind of effect as my tweet did internally. Right? So it was more about telling our own people, guys, back to work. Don't focus on all of this. This is noise. This is fraud. This will go away in 3 days. None of this will matter in 72 hours. So, and none of it mattered after after
Yeah,
like
that was
72
my
hours.
next question.
It all died.
Has life changed after the IPO? And if yes, how?
I think there's a lot of pressure, not from investors and public market. I think the valuation, people don't understand how valuations and companies work. So people think that all these $15 billion, everybody at Zomato, all of them have $15 billion in their personal banks. So we're getting a lot of large company versus small company kind of hate from a lot of sectors. And we used to get a lot of love 3 days before the IPO, right? I mean, we did so much social work during COVID. Everybody forgot everything after the IPO. None of that mattered. We're just rich, spoiled brats kind of branding after the IPO, which is painful to see, but it is what it is, right? So I think we'll get over that as well.
Well, that's a really, really interesting observation there. You're saying that all the love that you got in the pre IPO time suddenly changed overnight because it's a perception issue post the IPO, just because of the kind of blockbuster valuations that we saw. Is that correct?
That's what we feel. I mean, there might be more to it, but that's what we feel right now.
Wow, wow! I think that says a lot. Sanjeev, Mohit, your thoughts around that, and I would also like to segue into talking about what's happening in the Indian startup ecosystem right now. The valuations, there's a lot of exuberance. How real is it? A lot of people talking about whether this is the real India story coming out, or is there a bubble out there? So let's talk a little more about why Zomato's IPO was a historical moment, because DP doesn't believe it was, but I think everyone else in the industry does. And what is going on in the ecosystem right now? Sanjeev, to you first.
Look, I think the Zomato IPO proved that you can get valuations that are perhaps higher than the US for a good company. Maybe it's not higher, maybe it's as high, but look, you can get very good valuations. You can get very good. You can get a very good book in terms of quality of investors. I was speaking to Akshant the other day, and he told me there were at least 20 investors who opened accounts in India for the first time. Institutional investors, large, very well reputed institutional investors who opened their accounts for the first time to invest in the Zomato IPO. I think when you look at the retail book, there were people who invested for the first time in their lives in the stock market in India to apply for Zomato shares. So I think Zomato was a blockbuster in many, many ways. I think it was the first company where investors in India, the Indian mutual funds, retail HNI investors were willing to take a bet on a company and give it this kind of valuation when the company was yet to make a profit. Right? They were betting on the future, they were betting on the brand, they were betting on. See, Zomato is closest to a cult brand that I have seen in India in recent years or decades. And I began my career in advertising and then consumer marketing, so I know a little bit about that.
Right.
And I think that cult brand really helped in the retail and HNI book. I think if I had to pick one startup, which from the current lot, which should have gone public first before anybody else, to set the tone, to show the way, that was Zomato. And I'm so glad from the entire ecosystem perspective that it was Zomato that went first,
Right. Right.
because this gives confidence to everybody else.
Right. Mohit, share with us a little more about what next for the startup ecosystem with the Zomato IPO in many ways, setting the tone, being that big milestone that Sanjeev's talking about.
First we should not overreact to any one event and any one year. It's important for everyone to remember that for Zomato to have gone public successfully this year, the journey started, like Dipinder said, 13 years back, and it's been a freaking slog. And there's nothing like an overnight success for any company. No one can get that lucky, and no one can get that, time the markets perfectly. This is hard work for any company to get of value. So I think the celebration for me, and why Zomato is important, is it really has opened up in many ways people's belief. But if you look at the data this year, for Sequoia, I don't know it for the entire industry, but for Sequoia, this is today we had Truecaller go public, which is actually IPO number 7 for just this calendar year, and there are a bunch of more that have actually filed to go public now. The reason this is happening is not because of anything special right now going on in 2021. The reason this is happening is these companies have been growing for the last 8 to 10 or 12 years, and day in day out, sort of dominating their markets, or proving out their products in the market, and now getting to hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue scale, which then deserves to have a predictable business model that can then take you public. So I just want to underline that this is a little bit of the fruit that got sown many years back, and we shouldn't sort of get too carried away about something happening right now. Valuations will go up and down and will change, but like Dipinder said, if you take more of a 10-year view, it is hard to argue that why would India not have many more founders who get inspired by the Zomatos and the Freshworks of the world in the next decade. To give you a sense, India today, I think at last count today, has something like 61, 62 unicorns, as you've been counting in the media. But here's the crazy part. 60% of those 60 got built or got reached that mark in the last 18 to 20 months. So the pace at which these companies are just getting that big. Now, some of them are still early in revenues. You could argue whether the valuations count, and you're probably right on all counts. But no one can argue that the number of companies that are getting to substantial valuations and revenues is just happening at a faster pace than we've ever seen. So super bullish on this next decade. Less worried about the valuations in any one period of time. There'll be cycles.
Right, there will be cycles, but you're saying that the India story is real, the India story is here to stay. Because when you bet on companies and business models like Zomato, you're also betting on an entire consumer base, the Indian consumer base, and in this case, of course, an India to international story as well. But a lot of LPs, a lot of investors, others who are viewing, want to understand where the India market will be, say, 5 years from now. And Mohit, just elaborate a little more on your vision on the way you're seeing those trends pick up, especially what has happened in a post-pandemic world with
I'll take one
digitization.
particular, I'll take a very specific example to make it real. Dipinder talked about how when they started food delivery, they were not sure that they would end up having riders to the scale that they have. Now, the reason companies like Dipinder and like Zomato and others had to go full stack, as we call it, which is literally build every element of the entire model needed, or Flipkart in the early days with their logistics, was because we just didn't have that infrastructure. Now you look at the new slew of companies that are getting created, they actually can build on top of what's already got built. So the speed and size with which they can now scale is just that much faster, if you will. A good example of this is a young company, not so young anymore, called Misho, that we were early investors in. Misho is, going after the e-commerce opportunity in India. Now, this last month, close to 25,000 pin codes, over 5,000 cities and towns are actually buying from a platform like that. This is unbelievable in terms of how deep the demand for something like online buying has reached. And sure, the sizes are small, and sure, they'll all start where they do, but as anyone in the digital economy will tell you, it all starts with that trial, and then you sort of just see the convenience, and it grows from there. So I'm very bullish on the depth of the Indian market for many products and services that are getting disrupted by the online behavior.
Great. Deepinder, your thoughts on the fact that the journey timelines have shortened considerably. As Sanjeev and Mohit were talking about. For you, the idea to IPO journey has been a 13-year long one, but for many others, that timeline is way shorter. Your thoughts around the fact that we're seeing that level of traction now, and companies are getting to that stage way quicker.
For us also, it's way shorter now, right? So it's shorter for everyone. So everybody wins. It's actually level playing field for everyone. So good. And I think if these cycles are shorter, we can actually iterate faster. Um, of course, you lose the same amount of money in 3 years compared to what you would have lost earlier in 7 years, but at least you lose less time. So you can iterate faster.
All right. As we come to the close of the session, I do want to be mindful of time, and we can go on and on because we haven't even scratched the surface as far as this amazing story is concerned. I'm sure there are so many anecdotes, so many stories, so many remarkable moments to talk about. But it'll be important to perhaps talk about what has given you the most satisfaction in this journey, Dipinder. Very often it may not be the IPO for you, which many others would term as the biggest milestone, but it could be something else that has satisfied you the most. And while you answer that, also the fact that your journey, especially when people talk about your journey from a small town, the son of a school teacher, an inspiration to many founders, how you've literally grown, how you've been so self-made. Is that position of privilege one also of responsibility, where you want to make sure that you continue to be inspiring to those hundreds of founders, thousands of founders out there?
So, what was the first question? Sorry.
So the first question is really about your most gratifying moment in that journey.
Most gratifying moment. I will tell you that. I think there's no moment, right? So I think what I have most amount of like gratitude for is the kind of connection or the like relationship that I have with the team around me. I don't think I would have had such a deep relationship with anybody in this world if I was not doing Zomato, because normal life doesn't lend you the chance to connect with people the way we do here, right? Because high stress um, makes you have conversations which help you get to know each other really, really well. It just doesn't happen in normal life. I think that's something I'm super grateful for. I think I have friends for life, and I really do mean it. And I think people also, I would hope that they actually consider me as a friend for life. So I think that's really cool. Um, the second one, actually, until about last week, I used to think of myself as, wow, I am maybe slightly cool to have come from Muxer, blah, 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 to have gotten here. And I used to give myself credit for it. But then I met another founder, mm, female founder, had a child marriage at age of 11, went to IIT against all odds, runs a startup now, funded. Okay, so I mean, on its way to being a unicorn, maybe next 6 months. And then when I look at her story, and then when I look at my story, I feel like, okay, come on, you did nothing. You actually had a privileged background. Like, even if I come from a village, I had privilege all along. So it's okay. I just wasn't lazy, right? And that doesn't count for much. But there are a lot of others who are doing a lot more and fighting a lot more odds to get to where they're trying to get to. So it's okay.
Depinder, you're being modest. Clearly, a lot of others wouldn't see it this way, but yes, thank you for sharing that story because I'm sure it means a lot to people who are watching this. Sanjeev and Mohit, your thoughts around Zomato 10 years from now, and that one message that you have for Depinder and team, and of course, we're going to end with the 10-year vision from Depinder. Sanjeev, any
Yeah.
advice, any thoughts for
And
Depinder?
see, I think the great thing about Zomato over the last 13 years, the last 11 years since I've known Deepinder, is its continuous ability to adapt, to change strategies, change course, adapt to changing needs, circumstances, competition, environment, regulation, morphing, pivoting, experimenting, failing often, succeeding sometimes, but then making those 2 successes out of 10 really count, innovating, imagining, audacious vision. I think those fundamental DNA traits will continue. I don't think that's going to change. And therefore, where Zomato will be 10 years from now, hard for me to say. I can say anything. You can't. You won't talk to me 10 years from now. Hey, 10 years ago you said this, right? So I can afford to be wrong. But the truth is, it's going to be hard to predict. I think clearly food will be a big part of it, food delivery. But around that, see, what I see Zomato moving in is 2, 3 directions, is keeping on trying. And one big one is, how do we leverage our delivery capabilities network further? Whether it's groceries, whether it's investing in grocers or whatever. right? And can we deliver? Can we leverage that because our riders are busy for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day because that's when the peak demand happens for lunch and dinner. So can we leverage this network for something else? And I think some of those things will really click. I see inorganic growth happening apart from organic growth. I see Deepinder with slightly gray hair, right? And Hey, you'll color your hair, Deepinder? You'll color your hair, Deepinder? Right?
Metabolic age 22, Sanjeev, I told you.
Okay. Okay. So, hard to say for sure, but these DNA traits will sort of continue. And Advice to Deepinder, off the top of my head. There's this line of Steve Jobs which Rashmi Bansal made famous in India in that book, Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish. I think Deepinder epitomizes that. He's stayed hungry and he stayed foolish, and therefore he's reached where he has.
With hungry, the pun intended clearly here in this
Yeah,
case.
but the foolishness to not know that a company out of India should not dream so big. That foolishness has brought him here.
Right, hungry and foolish. Mohit, before I come to you, a quick reaction from Deepinder around what Sanjeev said, about using the network for something else. I think, Deepinder, you've always held the belief that anything and everything that you're going to do with Zomato will be around food. Has that thought changed in any way, or do you think you're going to see that change? But I will come to you on the 10-year vision later, but just a quick response to what Sanjeev mentioned.
I can't talk about forward-looking statements, Shweta.
Oh, yes, of course, of course. Okay, Mohit.
Anybody else
See,
can,
that's
but I
such a big
can't.
change. See what a big change. Deepinder would have never paused before in life.
And
Now it's
that's
become
for
easy.
this.
I can actually easily pause. Sebi, I don't need to talk.
So that's how life has changed after the IPO,
Yeah,
Deepinder.
it's the
When I
only
ask you that
change.
Yeah,
question, there's a perfect answer to everything now.
exactly.
Yeah.
I don't need to talk anymore.
No, Shweta, my story is a little hotcake. Earlier this year, when India went through its worst ever crisis, um, Dipinder, Sanjeev, myself, many others from the startup ecosystem came around this whole need for oxygen and oxygen concentrators. We have something at Zomato called Feeding India that stepped up, and then Zomato, as a company, stepped up to help us at ACT grants. I just feel like as companies like Zomato win and win big commercially, we do have a responsibility. We live in a country where not everyone is as privileged as we are. And I just would love to see Dipinder continue to actually make, uh, take leadership, if you will, in showing the rest of the startup ecosystem that when you win and you win big, you should also sort of freaking make sure that everybody wins along with you and you have a role to play in the community building. These guys have done just amazing stuff around, gender, for example. I've been part of some real hard meetings where, how they've handled, issues that many other companies tiptoe around. So I just feel like some of the decisions and policies that Zomato puts out is being watched very closely by other founders and any startups. And I would encourage Dipinder to continue to be very bold in doing what's right for society, community, employees, beyond just the dollars and cents, and people will adopt.
All right, interesting and very, very, I think, relevant advice out there. Dipinder, the last word is yours. And you talked about how your thought around where will Zomato be 10 years from now is something that made you make important decisions around the company's business model. Is that something that still gives you sleepless nights?
Yes, right, because the world is actually changing so fast. Like as we said, we're in 3-year cycles now. Food delivery could be the mainstay of our business 10 years from now. It may not be the mainstay of our business 10 years from now. We don't know. So trying to actually predict the chessboard 10 years from now, making sure that we are placed well to win, even then and the decade after that and the decade after that. That's my job. Like that's my only job at the end of the day. It's nothing else.
All right, and with the IPO now, is this something you do every morning when you wake up? I will not ask you what time you wake up now. Of course, we've heard that story, but if it is 9 a.m., are you watching the stock price every morning and at closing? Is that something that worries you in the more immediate term on a daily basis?
I've only seen the stock price maybe thrice or maybe four times since we went public, not more than that. We actually have a fine inside the office that if anybody talks about the stock price inside the office, we have to put 1,000 rupees in a box for Feeding India donation.
And
So
is that box getting filled rather quickly?
we have about 3.5 lakhs inside that box. So and the number is going down. So,
I think on that very, very interesting story, we're going to end this session. But thank you all. Thank you, Sanjeev, Mohit, and Dipinder for sharing so many anecdotes, and really kudos to everything that has gone into company building, everything that's gone into Zomato's success. Of course, I'm sure there were near death moments, there were highs and lows, there were twists and turns, but that's what makes that journey so much more exciting. And wishing all of you the very best as you move forward, and hope we can do this 10 years hence and look back on some of these conversations then. Thank you so much, and back to you, to the IBCA team.
Thank you. Thanks, Krita.
Thanks, Shweta.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Let us unravel the story of Zomato. And Sanjeev, Mohit, and Dipinder, thank you so much for sharing all your anecdotes and your stories. So we've had 3 days of power-packed sessions. And, the one thing that's common in all of these sessions and everyone agrees to is this decade is the maximum decade for India. On that note, I thank everyone who's been there for the session for all the 3 days. And this session wouldn't have been possible without the humongous efforts of the IBCA team. So I welcome the entire IBCA team to the stage.
Come on, we should have more of my team up here. Yes, that's the team which helped to build this, to get this together. Okay. Lovely. We all home? All here? Just want to make sure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, audience. Thank you, our executive committee, for helping us put this together. Our chairperson for her vision to get this event and having confidence that we'll be able to deliver. And I think we'll continue to toil for getting onboarding more offshore capital into India and building pools of domestic capital. So with that, we put this, our first maiden investor conference, which is called the Maximum India Conclave, closure. And we thank every one of you for your participation. Namaste and have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.